With most mainstream cruise lines, it's pretty common for a cruise ship to have at least a third of its cabins inside the ship without any windows. That can often mean thousands of inside cabins on the big ships, but I've just disembarked a luxury cruise where I had one of only 23 inside cabins on the entire ship. I've been cruising with the budget and mainstream cruise lines for years, and I'm very used to cruising in the cheapest cabin on the ship. I do everything I can to reduce the cost, and I've had some interesting cabins as a result. Most luxury cruise ships don't have inside cabins at all, so when I saw that the Azamara Onward had them, I decided to book one. I had no idea how they could make an inside cabin luxurious, and I was excited to get to compare this cabin with one that might cost a quarter of the price on a different cruise line. Azamara do describe their rooms as being a boutique hotel at sea, so they've set themselves a high bar there to live up to. In reality, there were things that I preferred about this ship and things that I thought budget cruise ships did better. I also had one big problem with this cabin, and I had to call maintenance late at night, but more about that later. I booked a guaranteed inside cabin, meaning that I didn't pick my specific cabin location. This meant that I could be given a cabin anywhere on the ship, and normally that means that there's lots of options. On this cruise though, I knew that there were only 23 inside cabins, so I could only be given a cabin on decks 4, 6, 7 or 8. On most of the decks, the inside cabins were between the two staircases, so I hoped that I would have a cabin kind of in the middle. The ship only had 11 decks in total, so I didn't really mind which deck I was on. It wasn't like I would be put somewhere where I would be 12 decks away from the buffet. The ship just wasn't that big. A couple of weeks before our cruise, our cabin was assigned to us, and we were given cabin 7069. I went straight to the Azamara website and I found our cabin right in the middle. It seemed like a good enough location, but I didn't know at this point just how much cruising on a smaller ship would change the way that I cruised. Our cabin was actually off an internal corridor instead of on the main corridor. We never heard anybody walk past here because there wasn't really any reason for anyone to walk here unless they had one of these 4 cabins. Before I came on the ship, I did read reviews of the cabins, and I read quite a few that said that the cabins looked dated. This ship is advertised as Azamara's new ship, but she was actually built in 1999 and she spent most of her life with Princess Cruises as Pacific Princess. My first impressions of the cabin were very good. It felt very bright, it felt very light, and I liked this sofa space. I didn't know at this point what that extra sofa space meant that we had to sacrifice, but when I was unpacking, I sat here and at this point it was very useful. There were loads of mirrors in this cabin, so I could see myself multiple times if I wanted to. It is strange to see the back of your own head, but you can do that in this cabin. By the bed, there were a couple of little mirrors too, so the whole room just felt very spacious. When we entered the room, the bed was made up as a double bed. I was cruising with my brother, so when we met the cabin steward, we asked him if he could change it to twins. Our cabin steward did come to us to introduce himself, but if your cabin steward doesn't do that, you can just leave a little polite note on the bed that says, please could we have the bed as twins? You don't have to stick with how your bed is set up. On every cruise ship I've ever been on, apart from the Disney Magic, the bed is either twins or a double. On the Disney Magic, the bed doesn't split and I had to sleep on the sofa during that cruise. It was actually pretty comfortable, but most cruise ships you can have twins or a double bed. I did have a comment a while ago from somebody who took a cruise with a friend. They were faced with a double bed and they didn't know that they could change it, so they awkwardly shared the bed for a week. You don't have to do that. Ask your cabin steward. The inside cabins on board the Azamara Onward are around 15 square feet, which is pretty standard. The room definitely felt more spacious when we had the beds apart, but I never felt claustrophobic in this room. Never. Our suitcases arrived a little while after we got into the cabin, and one of the first things I did was to get myself a drink for the minibar so that I could have a drink while I was unpacking. If you take a cruise with a budget or a mainstream cruise line, you have to pay for everything in the minibar, so I would recommend that you just don't look at it. But on Azamara, the minibar is included and they replace it every time they clean your room. I remembered reading on the Azamara website that we would get turned down treats. It isn't unusual for some cruise lines to give you a chocolate on the pillow when they make your bed. It turns out that the turn down treats on Azamara are just tiny pieces of cake or tiny little chocolate brownies. Either way, I really enjoyed them. The design of the cabin is the same in the balconies and in the suites. On the first day of my cruise, I met some lovely friends on board who let me have a look around their suite. They had a huge lounge, a massive bedroom, tons of storage, and a balcony that stretched across the back of the ship. The suites do also come with a butler, but I'm not sure in reality what I would get a butler to do. There are self-serve laundries that you can use on Azamara, so I did do a little bit of ironing. I suppose I could get my butler to do my ironing for me, but I really wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't want somebody unpacking my suitcase for me. That just seems strange. It was easy to see that the ship wasn't new, but nothing was damaged, nothing was broken. Sometimes the doors of the cabinets would be hanging down a little bit, but apart from that, everything felt perfectly in its place. There was a nice new TV and there were USBs by the bed. Normally you'll not find that on a cruise ship this old, but clearly they added those in one of the refits. The TV was parallel to the bed, which meant that I couldn't really lay in bed and watch TV, which is what I would normally do. I suppose the idea is that you would watch TV from the sofa, but in reality we rarely did that. There were a couple of TV channels, most of them were news. There was one with movies, which was constantly on a loop. They played the Downton Abbey movie 12 times during one day. And there was another channel with TV shows. We really didn't watch much TV, but we didn't come on this cruise to watch TV. I recently asked you if you would prefer a cabin with a sofa or one with more storage in its place. To my surprise, 72% of you said that you would prefer the sofa and less storage. If you do have extra guests staying in your cabin, they'll stay in beds that are called Pullman beds. These are beds that come down from the ceiling, and I have stayed in them in the past. They're actually okay for an adult, and I am staying in one again next year. I wouldn't recommend it for a very long time, but for a week or less, even as an adult, it's totally fine. And if you're cruising with children, these beds are great fun. I used to love these. Next on my to explore list was the bathroom, and this was the area that I felt really let down the cabin. I had read reviews before the cruise, and many said that the bathroom was tiny, and quite a few said that the shower was unusable. I thought to myself, oh, that's no problem. I've cruised with the Virgin Voyages. It's not possible to make a bathroom smaller than that. It turns out it is, and they did on this ship. I feel as though to fit in that sofa, what we sacrificed was the shower space. I didn't have any way to measure the shower. I don't normally cruise with a tape measure, although I might start doing that. I decided to measure the bottom of the shower with toothpaste tubes. I had a toothpaste tube with me. At the time it seemed logical. I thought that was fine. I shared this on the internet, and apparently that's not a normal way to measure things. It's also not a very good way to measure things because toothpaste tubes do vary a lot, but I think I have started some sort of trend because I've been sent so many pictures like this since I came back from this cruise, and going forward we're just going to measure things in toothpastes. The design of the bathroom was lovely, and there was enough storage in here for us too. If there was more of you sharing the cabin, I think you would struggle because there really wasn't much space to put your things. I did like all of the toiletries that they provided, and in true budget cruiser fashion, I did take some of them home with me. You can take the budget cruiser off of a budget cruise, but you can't take the budget cruise attitude out of me. Even if you put me on a luxury cruise, I'm taking those toiletries. I've paid for them. The shower was totally okay when nobody was in it. If you just turned on the shower, all of the water would fit in the bottom part, but as soon as you stepped into the shower and the water went off your arms or off your shoulders or off your legs, it would go into the main bathroom. There was no stopping the water from going into the main bathroom. The shower was okay for me just about, but it was definitely designed based on somebody of my height and my width, my size. If you're somebody who's taller or wider than me, I think you would really struggle with this shower, and it would be completely unusable to some people. If you couldn't use this shower for whatever reason, you could always use the showers that were at the gym or the spa, but you might find that everybody is there on this cruise. I did wonder if the other cabins would also have the same size of bathroom. I thought if that's only 23 cabins on the ship, that's not too bad, but a friend of mine did let me have a look around his balcony cabin later, and I can confirm that the balcony bathrooms are exactly the same as the inside cabin bathrooms. When I tweeted that I was staying in this cabin, I had a message from a friend who said that when they were in the shower, they managed to shave the shower curtain instead of shaving their legs. And I totally can see why. It was a shower curtain, not the screen, and it really did stick to me. There was no way to get away from it because the shower was just tiny. If you're somebody who likes to take a nap when you're on the toilet, this is the perfect cabin for you. I don't know if anybody really does that, but the towels and the robes would be right in your face because they're on the back of the door, and you could take a nap here. I'm not sure why the toilet was at that angle, but it worked perfectly, and I'm happy to confirm that the toilet roll was not as thin as it was on my Carnival cruise. Sometimes on cruise ships the toilet paper can be very thin, but on Azamara it was okay. Even though the bathroom was small, it was always spotlessly clean, and we were very well looked after by our cabin steward. Our cabin steward was pretty magic. We would go to breakfast for the shortest period of time, and he would manage to come in and make up our room and be gone before we came back. I always try and leave my cabin as tidy as possible, and I'll try and tidy it up on my way out. I hope that the cabin steward will just have to come in and make the bed, maybe hoover or vacuum if you're from the US, and change the towels, but I don't want them to have to do much more than that. Sometimes when you're on a cruise and you walk down the corridor, you'll be able to have a look into the other cabins. It's fantastic. I definitely recommend you do it, but you'll be able to see how some other people leave their rooms. There'll be food everywhere, there'll be rubbish everywhere, they've made no effort to tidy, and I just think that's so rude. The beds in our cabin were very fluffy and it was like sleeping on a giant cloud. The pillows were so fluffy too. I loved that there was a proper duvet and a sheet, and the storage in the bedside table was very, very useful. I did have a plug socket behind my head, and it was a universal plug socket where you could plug in European, UK or US plugs to it. Absolutely amazing. In theory, you could charge your phone here or something, but I wouldn't recommend doing that, as I found out on the first night. If you try and charge something behind your head when you're asleep, you're going to wake up with a plug socket to the face, and it's going to hurt. And that's what I did. The trade-off though was that we had this button in the middle of the bed so that we could use to turn on and off the main lights. If we had the bed as a double, we would have been able to use the side plugs, but we also would have risked turning on the lights in the middle of the night. I guess if you do have the light switch here though, it's just a risk that you have to take, or as I would say, risk it for a biscuit. Apparently risk it for a biscuit is a Britishism. It's a very common saying here. I heard it on TV this morning. Risk it for a biscuit just means that you have to take a risk in order to get something good, and biscuits are very, very good. We are of course talking about the UK version of biscuits, not the US biscuits. There were also more plug sockets on the desk, and there was a safe and some bottles of water. I really like the colour scheme of this cabin, but that may have been impacted by the last inside cabin I had on the budget cruise line Carnival. My Carnival inside cabin was very colourful, and although I prefer the design of the Azamara cabin, I think that the Carnival cabin was actually a better design for me, and the bathroom was about double the size. I think it's a case of style over substance. Our Carnival inside cabin definitely didn't have any style, but it was very, very functional, and our Azamara cabin looked absolutely fantastic, but there are a few things about it, like the shower, that just weren't very functional. When I looked at the website pre-cruise, I saw that the design of the carpet looked like somebody had spilt something and then dragged somebody across the room. In reality, the design was much more subtle and I really preferred it. I did spend quite a lot of time on the floor on this cruise, which is how I know that the cabin was spotlessly clean. There was nothing underneath the beds, there was no dust anywhere. I spent a lot of time on that floor. I was on the floor because if I lay near the door and I had the door propped open, I could get the 4G from outside and I could go on my phone. We did have fresh flowers in our cabin, which was very nice, and all of the bedding and all of the materials felt very new. The way that cruise ship cabins are built is that they are built fully formed and then slid in the side of the cruise ship, so the bathroom is already the size that it is. They can't change that now, we've just got to deal with it. Towards the end of our cruise, we did start to notice a problem with our cabin door. Given the age of the ship, I wasn't surprised to have some problems, and I think it's a lot more important how a cruise line deals with a problem rather than if a problem actually happens. To find out what that problem was and why it honestly sounded like our cabin door was about to blow away, check out this video next. This is all about my cruise on board the Azamara Onward.